And I believe we are recording. Put you and me. There we go. We're on. All right, so as discussed previously from you and I, we are going to take some images and we are going to break them down, if that's cool with you.
Yep.
Let me go over to Procreate. I have preloaded, and essentially this is what we call a mood board, an inspiration board. It's basically when you go in and you Google search, presumably, Ashlianna, you got these off of Google, right?
Pinterest, yeah.
Or Pinterest, right? And any photo source, and you collect them into what is a mood board. It really just is a series of images that are designed to show your intent for the piece of art or for whatever idea you want to present to others, or it is exact inspiration for generating a piece of art. So in this case, correct me if I'm wrong, the goal was to just kind of find some dynamic like models in different poses. Is that correct?
You are correct.
You are correct, sir. So in doing so, I think what the goal is, not I think, I know what the goal is, to take some of these poses and kind of boil them down into what makes them work. And in order to do that, we got to find the structure of what's going on underneath. So I leave it to you. We see this full page of images, all of them, actually one of them more dynamic than the next. Do you have any in this group that you feel like would be a cool one to just kind of, us to really kind of get inside of?
I really liked the one with the girl with the shoe kicking out and the orange crop top.
This one right here?
Yeah, I thought that one was pretty good.
All right, let's start there. All right, so how do we do this? Very, very simple. First things first, we are using Procreate. I personally am on my iPad, and I mean old school iPad Pro, first gen, using the Apple Pencil. And so that shouldn't really mean much because it still works and it works great. But I just want to let you guys know the specs of the tech. As you can see here on the screen, we have layer 1. I'm going to create a layer on top. That's going to be our sort of our breakdown layer. And layer 1, we are going to diminish. We're going to take the opacity down a notch so we can really see what's going on underneath. Cool. Is this kind of what you do when you do these breakdowns, Ash?
Yeah.
All right. So if you do it, then everyone should as well. All right. So I'm going to select the brush. I like the technical pen. But you can use pencil. You can use anything you want, really. I'll take a 6B pencil just for giggles.
That's what I use.
And yeah, is that what you use as well? 6B?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm gonna select red just so we can really see what's going on. And I'm gonna make sure I'm on that layer. I'm gonna make so sure that I'm gonna rename it, sketch layer. And we'll rename that layer ref layer for reference. Okay, back to the sketch layer. So I like to, first things first, break down what you and I discussed earlier is that arch, that flow.
Exactly.
So that is a huge part of finding characters and getting a sense of what they are, actually where the weight distribution is. That's the key element to figuring that stuff out. So, let me reduce the size of that brush. So in her case, the weight distribution is going in 2 places. One, it's obviously the one, whoa, that's huge. It's the one, find that right size. There you go. Somewhere in that range. It's this swoop there, and clearly this swoop here. All right, where her hip becomes kind of like the fulcrum. And then you can see she's leaning on her heel, and then it comes back up that way. So once you have a sense of that pattern, that sort of like what the flow is, that is essentially your building blocks. It's your cornerstone. It's the first step you want to take. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So usually what I do next, Ash, is I kind of zone it out. I kind of figure out, all right. So once I kind of have that swoop, I start zoning out like the different segments, meaning like from why do I have such a massive brush? Oh, I know what it is. It's because I have like this thing set to massive. Let me just go over here and actually, no, even better yet. I'm gonna go to my other favorite sketching brush, the ink bleed for me. There we go. All right, so I start figuring out the zones. So we have the swoop that is happening from shoulder to shoulder across her collarbone, right? I figure out the swoop that's happening from the hip, right? Then I figure out the swoop at the foot. So if I take away her, there's not much there to look at, right? But that is essentially the essence of this pose. That's the energy. It's the energy that's going down and the energy that's going in this direction. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then it's almost like from her head to her hip to her foot. It's almost like, all right, it's almost like there's water running downhill. And it runs downhill and then it meets the ground and it kicks back up again here at where her foot meets the ground. But this is the impact point. Sorry, this is the point where the weight is absolutely being distributed. So once you know that, that's really, really important to kind of like figuring out the flow of a character. Okay? So back to this. All right, so I've got the swoop there. So I also want to kind of figure out the points where the joints meet. So I'll also swoop over from the shoulder to there. And obviously this arm tucks behind her body, so we don't really see the other hand, right? We see from that shoulder to about where the elbow is, to about where the wrist is, to about where the hand is. And the reason I'm rendering it like this, Ash, is because I want you and like every other artist to kind of know that once you have a sense of how long this portion of the arm is, and this portion of the arm is, the only really way to get there is to have a sense of like the anchor points.
Okay.
Right? This is the way to kind of get proportion. I'll do the same for the head. I'll just kind of put a little oval in to represent her head. But same thing, where the neck meets where the center of the collarbone. That's important, right? So we have our torso, basically her upper body, and then we have her hip, the lower sort of trunk of the body, right? Then we have the remainder of the leg. So from where the hip, sorry, hopefully you can see that okay, meets the knee, meets the ankle, and then into the foot. So we have the leg to the knee, calf into the ankle, and then this big foot in the foreground. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So now we see where the other hip is right around there. So we can swoop this leg to about there for the knee, down to the ankle, and then into the other foot. Then I literally just draw the shape of the leg. Calf to ankle, other foot. Same thing with the shoulder. Shoulder, upper arm, lower arm, which is tucked behind the body. And then this side, kind of, I think your hair a little bit obscures it, or actually, I think it's a scarf. Yeah, it's a scarf that sort of obscures it. But you can see that's where that portion of the upper arm ends, and that is where the forearm ends into the hand. So, not a whole lot happening here, but I want you to see, I'm gonna take it away. Hopefully you can see we have the essence of her pose. Right?
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I will take this and move it so we can see it side by side. You see what I'm saying in terms of like capturing the feel?
Yes.
That's really all there is to it. I know it sounds like overly simplistic, and it is. And certainly we can get into the dynamics of her anatomy and exactly what, how the neck connects to the body and how the shoulder joint goes. We can get into all that. But to be honest with you, this is the essence of like drawing a figure.
Okay.
All right. let's take this character for instance. All right, so we'll keep that one. We'll make a new layer, pick a new color. We'll go bluish for this one. Okay, so let's look at her. Same deal. What's the central swoop doing? It's doing this, and then and it's kicking back. It's kicking back up into this direction. So it's arrow down, arrow here, and then arrow down this way, right? Arrow out this way, right? Same thing here. We know arrow down here, arrow down here, right? And then the head. All right? So once we have that basic stroke like that, you could almost, Ash, you could almost just do these. Like you literally could just almost stop here and practice this in order to kind of really get a sense on how to capture, not even, it doesn't necessarily have to be realistic dynamic poses from real people. I think it's ideal if you're working from photos, and then we can kind of go back and sort of stylize them, because you'll have a better sense of what real anatomy is doing. However, you can do this for any characters at any pose, right? You could do like literally a series of, like what we have here, of these sort of structure sketches where you're figuring out the direction of the flow, like what her body's doing, just by doing a series of arrows. And by the way, I just made this up. I literally just made this, I don't know why it didn't occur to me sooner, but if you do a series of arrows like that, they're basically making these little stick figures, right? But what you're doing is you're training your eye to kind of see the flow of the anatomy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So if I continue that theme, we'll take this young lady here, right? Same deal. Her energy is literally going to where she's sitting on the chair. Same thing with her arm. It's going downward, like literally away from the chair and down to the ground here. This part of the body where it's connecting to the chair there. This from the hip to the knee and then out and then back up is happening on there. And that leg is tucked behind this one. Actually tucked behind this one. Sorry, this way. Right? And we remove that and we have that. But it's funny, it doesn't look like much. And I bet you a lot of people watching this would be like, seriously, we're just gonna do like stick figures? That's what I signed up for. But I honestly think if you don't train yourself to see how things flow and how things work and how, like, particularly if you want to draw dynamic poses, like this is a great one, for example. This pose here. Actually, I'm gonna darken this just a touch so we can see it a little better. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
All right, so one more of these little, I love to find the head first, but you don't have to. You can find the body first. All right, make sure I'm on the right layer, and I am. All right, so we can see, right? Energy's going to the hip, right? And then off the hip and down the leg, which we don't see the rest of it, but we know it goes down. we assume that she has a lower part of her leg, right? We can just to assume, all right? So from the torso into that knee, right? And then down and out for that arrow, right? We can also see from where the shoulder goes, how like that energy boom right into the elbow and then back out this way to connect to her thigh. And we don't see the back arm, but we can assume the back arm is probably somewhere over here, I would guess. And then her head is tucked, kind of like ever so gently tucked into that part of her shoulder. All right, so I will take away the thing. But do you see the energy?
Absolutely.
Cool.
So that first picture that you did, the one that you just finished doing,
Yep.
the gray one.
Yep.
I picked that image because it reminded me of an image done by Bruce Timm. And I was wondering, because Bruce Timm tends to push his figures even further.
Yep.
So I was wondering if you had any advice about how to further push the figures, so like not only are their poses dynamic, but they're also exaggerated.
I think the first step would be exactly what we're doing here. I think you got to play around with the realistic anatomy before you push it.
Okay.
In other words, you almost need to know the rules of the game before you can break the game. Before you can break those rules.
Okay.
And I think doing these little studies, these sort of like gestural studies. Now, again, you can start with, actually, I'll continue on with her, right? Matter of fact, no, I'm going to continue on with this one because I think this one's a little more developed in terms of her full pose. I'll use her as an example. All right, so I'm going to create a new layer on top of that. We'll pick a different color. We'll go with an orange, I guess. Right? I'm going to diminish this line a little bit so it fades it back. All right, so once you've taken the step of, again, we're establishing rules of the game. Once you've taken the step of sort of now knowing the flow and the direction of all the different elements, this is the time where you really start breaking down and start doing your analysis. So we'll start with the head. More often than not, you can always start with a circle for a head, all right? And then off of the head, you can create the jawline. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then from there, you can establish the eye line. And then of course you can render the ear just so you know where that goes. You can throw a little indication for an eye and mouth just so you kind of know where you stand, okay? So the further break it down, again, we're still using that blue sort of like gestural arrow system as kind of like a basis. So we see she has this enormously long neck, so we can render that, right? We know, because we see the flow of her collarbone, we know the collarbone goes like that. So from this portion of her body over to this portion of the body is represented here in the photo, right? So from there, we know that this is the point where her shoulders go. It's probably something like that. So we can kind of use that as an anchor point for where her center torso would be. Something like this. The center part of her torso and the upper part of her arm. You ever read the book, How to Draw the Marvel Comics Way?
No.
You should check that. Actually, that should be required reading for anyone who likes to sketch and draw. It's How to Draw the Marvel Comics Way by Stan Lee and I think it was John Buscema. Old school artist. I think the book may have came out in the 70s or the 80s. Matter of fact, it probably came out in the 60s. Now that I think about it, the 70s. But it's literally like the process that like world-class comic book artists use to break down the human figure. And a lot of it is done in cylinders. I don't think we need to go to that point where every single thing here is a cylinder. But we definitely want to go to the point where once we've established the flow, we start adding the segments in as accurately as possible based off of that line, that little arrow line we created, okay? So we know where all of our pieces go, like all our pieces in the anatomy go. So really all I've done here, Ash, is like, I'm just literally breaking down the form into its bits. It's like it's chunks, like I mentioned in the early stage, like the upper torso, the sort of hip, sort of trunk part of the human, up into her thigh, to where her knee meets, and then her legs. She's got these enormously long legs. Then into the ankle, and then into the foot. All right, same thing there. Knee, we don't see what's happening underneath, but we can kind of guess that the thigh goes in there, and then her lower leg, calf area, front of leg, ankle into foot goes like this, okay? And so I'm gonna take away the photo, and that's what we have. You kind of see what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's what happens though. If you do enough of these type drawings, Ash, like you will get such a grasp of what's kind of going on with the body, that's A, number one, just kind of need to know. And then B, how do you manipulate it? How do you change what's going on with the body? How do you change the position with the knowledge of what's going on here? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm going to take away that and that. So if I take that same character, right, I'm going to sort of extrapolate based off of these proportions, essentially how tall I think she is. If we start with the head, she's got that enormously long neck, right? Figure torso, it's probably about yay big. She's got that sort of gap there in between to represent sort of her midsection, right? You notice even on this one, I drew the center line even on this one, even though I probably don't necessarily need it, right? So we know based off of this, I can kind of guess that her thigh leading to her knee is probably about there, okay? And then based off that, we know her calf all the way down to her, from the lower part of the leg all the way down to her ankle is probably about yay long based off of this, and then her feet, okay? And then we know based off of her shoulders probably extend about this far based off of what we rendered. Upper arm to elbow area, and then lower arm. We don't really see. I'm basing on this, Ash, that part, and then her hand. We'll just put just a little random hand in there. So if we have that, we can tell that's supermodel proportions, right? It's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And we do my classic trick for time's sake. We're gonna copy and paste that. Flip horizontal, slide that over. Right, you know I have to have some kind of hack for this, and just simply just draw the other side, which probably would take less time than what it's taking me to do this. All right, and then the head. Let's kind of we'll zoom in on the head based off of what we saw in the photo. Again, center line. So that circle that represents her skull, and then her jawline, and that really long neck. So, does that character, in my opinion, her represents her seated. Just based off of that, I'm able to extrapolate that just because I played around with these shapes to get an understanding of it.
Okay.
Is that kind of clear? I hope it is. Anyways, I could spend all day on this stuff. So what I highly recommend for you and any other artist, let me merge these two, is to do exactly what you did here. First things first, grab yourself a series of images, poses. The less static, the better. Kind of like what you've done here, where you're playing around with foreshortening. You're playing around with bodies in seated positions, bodies sort of extended and dynamic. Camera angles from above, camera angles from below. Like you did a great cross section of different characters. So what I would recommend, and this is your homework, Ash, is to go through and do breakdowns of each and every one of these in that simple way that I just showed you. Just using using just these kind of little arrow gestures to capture the sort of the flow of the pose, and then adding in these sort of like geometric volume shapes, right? For every character on that page. And then we can kind of analyze from there. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I'm not gonna say that anymore. Does that make sense? I already know what makes sense with you. I got it. You know it. All right, Ash, that's all there is to it.
Very cool.
We cool?
Mm-hmm.
All right, come on back to see how Ashlianna takes these little images and turns them into character design gold. You know how we do it. Sketchy go ichie. Live your moment. Happy sketching, y'all. Peace.